Good morning. My name is Valerie Leonard. I am the founder of nonprofit Utopia. We are the ideal community for people who want to start, manage, and grow nonprofits. And it's been my experience that all roads lead to compliance. And when I speak of compliance, I am speaking to the ability for organizations to adhere to rules. So, rules that the government puts on us, rules that our funders put on us, and all of that good stuff, right? So every now and then I have a video on compliance. We're not going to go into a whole heck of a lot of detail today, but if you want to do a deeper dive, you can go to our YouTube channel, and we have several videos on nonprofit compliance. You just go and do a search on non-compliant, I'm sorry, on compliance, and you should be able to find plenty of information. If you want to do a deeper dive, we do have a compliance challenge. It's a coaching program where we can hold your hand through the process. But if you take good notes, you should be able to do this on your own at home. All right. So if you have any comments or questions, feel free to post here. And then I will just go over this checklist so that you know what it is that you're looking for and all of that good stuff. All right. So just give me a moment and I will pull up pull up our presentation. So again, we're doing a compliance check, and we do have several videos on our YouTube channel that relate to compliance that go into much more detail. All right, so I want to give you a little bit of background information as to what the magnitude of the problem of nonprofit compliance is. I don't know if you're aware, or even if you care. I'm the only one who probably cares, but tax exempt organizations are twice as likely as individuals and corporations to be late with filing their annual returns. And I think a lot of that has to do with just ignorance. And when I say ignorance, I don't mean that in a bad way. I really believe that people don't know that they're supposed to comply with certain regulations. Sometimes they're so busy starting their nonprofit and trying to get the tax exempt status, they don't necessarily explore or think about everything else they need to keep in compliance with after they get started. All right, and we're here to make sure that you're not one of them. All right, so when we look at IRS filings, there are 2.9 million organizations in the United States, right? Nonprofits that are actually registered. So this um, has nothing to do with your church organizations, right? These are the nonprofits that have actually gone through the process of filing for tax exempt status. And of that 2.9 million, 100.06 million lost their tax exempt status. Why? Just because they didn't file Form 990 for 3 years in a row. There are a number of other reasons why they could lose their nonprofit, but 36% of them lost their nonprofit status just because they didn't file Form 990 for 3 years in a row. Compare that to the private sector, where you're looking at individuals and corporations. 85% of us file our taxes on time. Another sobering statistic, especially if you're in the state of Illinois, 25,533 organizations were automatically dissolved. They're involuntarily dissolved in the state of Illinois between 2020 and 2024. And this is usually because they did not file an annual report. All the annual report is asking you to do is let us know, or let the state know, you know, who's on your board, where you're located, and who is responsible for receiving notices, and that's your registered agent. So over the past 5 years, 25,000 organizations in Illinois did not do this. Don't you be one of them. So one of the first things we want to make sure that you do is file your annual report with the Secretary of State. It's a very easy form. You can file it online or you can download a form, fill it out, and mail it in. Basically, all you need to do is let the state know who your registered agent is, and that's the person who's responsible for receiving all of your legal notices. Let them know who's on your board. All right. The next thing you need to do is make sure you have a financial audit, and that's if it's required, right? And usually the thing that triggers a financial audit are one, you have a funder who requires it, or two, as a rule of thumb, if you have a budget of $750,000 a year, you should get an audit. If you can't afford to have an audit, at least have an outside CPA look at your books. They can do what we call a compilation, where they are making sure that your books are put together in a format that conforms with generally accepted accounting principles, but they're not necessarily giving an opinion on your finances. And that's, a little bit more independent than what you can do internally. And as you should know, you want to make sure that you maintain compliance with all the grant requirements from the funders that are giving you money. And in some cases, this may include a separate grant audit, depending on how much money, depending on the funder. All right. You need to file an annual report with the Attorney General, and this is not to be confused with the annual report that you file with the Secretary of State. They're for two different purposes. All right. The Attorney General is looking, in this case, for in their annual report, they're looking for a summary of financial information. And this is due 5.5 months after your fiscal year end. And you usually do this at the same time as you do your Form 990. So they're looking for financial information, whereas the Secretary of State, when they do their annual report, they are looking for, just basic information as to who they need to contact and who's on your board and what your address is. It is conceivable to get a certificate of good standing from the Secretary of State because you have filed that annual report with the Secretary of State, but still not be in good standing with the Attorney General because you didn't file this AG 990. All right. You need to also file your Form 990 with the federal government, and the Form 990 is something you file instead of filing taxes if you're a nonprofit. So, if you're a nonprofit, you do Form 990, and that's an information return, and you share information like, where you're located, you give financial information, you give information as it relates to your governance practices, as to your management practices, and some of the policies that you have in place. And that's due at the same time as your AG 990 IL. So that's 5.5 months after your fiscal year end. And then this is extremely important. You want to make sure that the records that you have concerning your registered agent are up to date. I can remember working with the client. They moved at least 3 times within 3 years. So they never got their notices from the IRS and from the state. And by the time they were able to connect with the state as well as the federal government was threatening to take away their tax exempt status because they didn't file, right? And part of the reason they didn't file is one, and when I say file, they didn't file their Form 990 for 3 years in a row. So part of the reason they didn't file is one, they had attorneys and they had bookkeepers who were actually keeping records, but they were not versed in nonprofits. They were more used to working with private sector clients. So their attorneys and their bookkeepers didn't know that this is something that they needed, and two, they didn't know it was something that they needed. One, because this isn't something that they do on the day-to-day basis. They're busy saving the world, right? And two, because they had moved around so many times, they didn't get the notices, right? Not until they're about to lose their tax exempt status. If you have payroll, you not only need to file payroll taxes, but you need to pay them. So there's a separate form for filing and a separate form for paying, and you have to do both. Alrighty. And if you own property as a nonprofit, and if you're in Cook County, I strongly recommend first that you hire an attorney. The forms that they have online are extremely complicated. So hire an attorney to help you navigate that stuff. Then you want to file a real estate exemption complaint. And then you want to file Form P-Tax 300. And again, this is above my pay grade. You need to have an attorney walk you through this process and make an appeal on your behalf. And this is something that you need to do every year. All right, another thing you need to do every year is file for state sales tax exempt status. And you can't get this unless, one, you can prove that you are exempt from federal taxes. And there are a number of other forms that you need to complete, or a number of other information you need to provide in addition to this tax one. So this is to put yourself on record as being exempt from sales tax. And again, you need to prove that you're exempt from federal income tax, and also, show the purpose of the organization, give them bylaws and all of that good stuff. And I can tell you up front, if you are an economic development organization, you will not be exempt from sales tax. All right. This is something you should have done when you started your organization, but it's not uncommon for organizations who are doing this themselves, starting off themselves without an attorney. It's not uncommon for them to not register with the state. And when I say register with the state, in this case, I'm talking about register with the State Department of Revenue. You need to complete Form Reg 1, and what this does is it puts the State Department of Revenue on notice that, one, you are a corporate entity doing business in the state of Illinois. It lets them know what type of organization you are. It lets them know if you're tax exempt or for profit. It lets them know also the types of activities within which you will be engaged. So I don't care how long you've been in business, if you've not completed Form Reg 1, you need to let the state know that you're here. Complete Form Reg 1. Alrighty, another form you need to fill out is the UI1 form. And what this does is helps you and the state determine your unemployment insurance liability, right? And once you complete this form, you then, have notified the state, and they will let you know when and how much you need to contribute to the state pool for unemployment insurance. For profits need to start paying into the unemployment pool immediately, whereas nonprofits, you don't have to pay into the fund until you have 4 employees on your payroll. And the thing is, I would recommend that you complete this form regardless of whether you have 0 employees or 4 or 5. Most of us are so busy doing the work, we're not tracking at what point we actually get 4 employees. So just fill out the form, even if you have no employees, so that when you meet that threshold of 4 employees, you won't have to worry about that. All right, this is something most organizations should do, or it's actually all organizations should do, but a number of organizations have not done this, even though they have been up and running. The Form CO1, CO2, these are forms that should be filled out just as soon as you start your organization. These are forms that, one, tell the state attorney general that you're in business. Not only are you in business, but that you're soliciting funds for fundraising for your organization. All right. The CO2 is a form that summarizes some of your financial information, and it's very similar. The information is very similar in nature to the form AG 990. You also, so in addition to the AG 990IL, and this is for folks in the state of Illinois, you have to complete CO1 and CO2. And if you are a religious organization, you file Form CO3, and you're putting the state on notice that you are a religious organization and you're not subject to the same types of reporting that other nonprofits are. You're keeping a separation between religious organizations and the state. All right, so that completes the checklist. I did not go into the same level of detail that I typically go into. I got several other videos that will, take you down a rabbit hole if you want to go there, right? But I just thought I'd use this as a time to remind you of all the forms that you should be completing to make sure that you're in compliance. If after listening to this video, you still want to do a deeper dive, you need someone to hold your hand, we do have a compliance challenge. And what that is one of our coaching products. And we will work with you. We'll do an audit of all of the filings that you have completed, compare that to what you should be completing, and make sure that you're current with all of your filings and going as far back as we need to make sure that you're in compliance so that you can get all the money that you have coming to you. One of the worst things you can have happen is to have someone say, look, I got an extra $100,000. It's yours. All you have to do is complete an application. You fill that application and they can't give you the money because you didn't fill out one of these forms to the state. I've seen it happen more than once. We don't want that to happen to you. All right. So if you have any questions, any comments, feel free to post. All right, it doesn't look like we have any questions or comments, so we're going to end it right here. I want to say thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your consideration, and please make sure that you're in compliance. Take care.